The penultimate episode of Fellow Travelers takes place amid the idyllic Fire Island Pines and a chaotic San Francisco in 1979, almost entirely. In episode 6 of the critically praised Showtime series, Fellow Travelers, we follow a passionate and vocal Tim as he heads to federal prison, after the show's first 5 episodes covered the political landscape of the Lavender Scare. Episode 7, White Nights, begins during the widely reported killings of San Francisco Mayor George Moscone and Harvey Milk, which sparked widespread demonstrations after the murderer Dan White was only charged with voluntary manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. In the 6th episode of Fellow Travelers, Jackson, Hawk's intellectual but impulsive young adolescent, was introduced. He had displayed signs of struggle with his identity development and a propensity for drug experimentation. In episode 6, which took place in 1968, Hawk, who had abandoned his future with Tim to conceal his sexual identity beneath the cover of a stereotypically traditional American family, had been informed of Jackson's problems. Tim, who was running from the law after destroying draft cards, had a connection to Jackson that Hawk had never had. This was especially true because Tim tried to show Jackson that he was interested in him, something Hawk had not done as a father. Tim and Frankie, both social workers at the Castro Mission Health Center in San Francisco, in May 1979. Tim has been inundated with inebriated phone calls and mails from a struggling Hawk who has experienced a terrible family tragedy. Tim phones Lucy to offer his condolences and, in essence, to get permission to visit Hawk at his Fire Island Pines, New York, vacation home. Although she has ejected Hawk from their house due to his alcohol drinking, Lucy claims she has no idea where Hawk is. She just knows he was someplace in New York. Tim finally arrives at Hawk's stunning Fire Island vacation house after several invitations. It should come as no surprise that Hawk has surrounded himself with all the hedonistic kinds of escape that a person of his wealth and charisma could possibly require. Tim, who's obviously been through a lot with his job and his stint in jail, awkwardly walks into a group of gay men who seem to be partying all the time. When Hawk shows up, the two get back together for the first time in 11 years. That is, they haven't spoken since Tim's release from prison. Tim tells Craig, Hawk's new romantic partner, that Hawk is grieving deeply on the inside due to Jackson's death from a heroin overdose. Even though Craig understands that Hawk seldom talks about his family, he tells Tim that Hawk has placed a claim on him and is controlling Hawk's drug use to maintain the never-ending party. Craig also acts as though he knows everything about Jackson. Tim is aware that although Hawk seems to appreciate Craig, Hawk is really using Craig as a crutch to escape his domestic duties and his overwhelming sense of remorse over Jackson's death. Craig is aware that the fun will end when Hawk returns to reality. In an effort to keep his job, as he puts it, Marcus has assumed a new persona as a professor at San Francisco State University, while maintaining his heterosexual male identity. Hawk's life, or rather 2 lives, have been governed by the same premise, but Marcus's student Jerome sees right through Hawk's facade. A classmate makes fun of Jerome for defending Harvey Milk, and he feels let down by Marcus's lack of support. Frankie raises concerns about Marcus's continued fear of coming out as his true identity to the public later in the episode. Hawk throws his gang of hedonistic men out of the house for the evening and prepares a romantic dinner for him and Tim to catch up over. Tim reveals to Hawk that he was only incarcerated for a year and a half for the incidents shown in the 6th episode of Fellow Travelers. Following his release, Tim worked as a social worker in San Francisco and came out to his family as gay. Tim worries about Hawk's possible suicidality when he tells him he wants to give him the deed to his Fire Island home. Hawk becomes infuriated when Tim confronts him with the reality, telling him that he should be at home with his family and that he needs to deal with Jackson's death head-on. During their disagreement, Hawk considers Tim as self-righteous boring, which prompts Tim to quickly pack his bags. The following morning, as yet another party gets underway, Tim leaves his bag behind and joins in on the fun, doing drugs, getting shots, and going out dancing. Tim has been itching to enjoy himself with Hawk the way he used to, but he also understands that staying a little while longer is the only way to have emotional access to him. Additionally, there are hints here and there that Tim is jealous of Craig and wants to let him know how much Hawk still cares about him. Kimberly starts questioning Lucy about the truth about her father, but Lucy responds that since she has spent so much time turning a blind eye, she will have to ask Hawk for herself. Kimberly calls Tim's employer, the Castro Mission Health Center in San Francisco, after discovering his business card on Hawk's desk. When she learns that Tim only works with LGBTQ+ people, she automatically believes that he is gay and that her father's former friend is actually more of a covered boyfriend. Frankie hasn't publicly acknowledged his sexual orientation, despite the fact that he and Marcus share a home in San Francisco. This tension explodes when Marcus tries to stop Frankie from taking part in the White Night Riots, wherein a large number of LGBTQ+ people demonstrated against Dan White's lenient sentencing for the murder of Harvey Milk. Frankie is confronted by Marcus, who is attempting to talk him out of participating in the demonstration outside the Elephant Walk bar. As Jerome looks on, Frankie pushes Marcus aside and exits the room. Marcus's cowardice makes Jerome shake his head in disappointment. Tim finds Craig and Hawk by themselves when he returns to Hawk's residence after dancing at a neighborhood bar on Fire Island. Hawk claims that Craig's claim that Tim left with someone else was a deceptive and brazen fabrication intended to distance Hawk and Tim from one another. Tim is furious and throws himself at Craig, but Hawk stops him from starting a fight by drawing them both in close and attempting to start a threesome. Everything appears to be moving in the right path until Hawk discovers a picture of Jackson on his nightstand, which plunges him into a shadowy realm he has been attempting to stay away from for months. Hawk is at last able to face his intense grief over Jackson's death when Tim is around. In a poignant and moving scene, Tim comforts Hawk as he starts to cry. Even though Hawk has so many layers and security systems that keep him from ever accessing his actual emotions, the goal of all of his phone conversations and postcards to Tim was to get to this private moment. Tim comforts Hawk, understanding that this is the main reason he is there. Marcus and Jerome make their way to the well-known homosexual club in San Francisco, Elephant Walk, where the protests are taking place. Marcus asks Jerome about his family situation, which brought him to the point of homelessness, and tries to convey to him his lengthy past with Frankie. Marcus is going to speak on courage when the police break through the bar's windows and start beating customers with batons. Marcus uses his body as a shield to keep Jerome safe from the police brutality as they pursue him and pull them off of him. Hawk and Tim have a meaningful chat during which Hawk is able to discuss Jackson. Hawk discloses that Jackson had experienced multiple problems with dangerous narcotics, especially heroin, and that both he and Lucy had tried their best to assist him. Hawk admits that he was well aware of Jackson's animosity toward him, which is why Jackson never took up drinking, because Hawk enjoyed it so much. Jackson detested Hawk for leading a lie-filled existence. Tim assists Hawk in realizing that he needs to go back to his loving family and stop attempting to harm himself by doing drugs. Watching home movies of Jackson and Hawk together, Kimberly and Lucy remember a time when everything was perfect. Lucy shares how much she misses Jackson and how much he was her little boy. She also admits that she and Hawk carry a great deal of guilt over his passing. Pregnant Kimberly says she plans to name her child Jack if it turns out to be a boy, which means a lot to Lucy, and will undoubtedly mean the same to Hawk. Following their genuine chat, Tim departs Fire Island with confidence, knowing that Hawk will follow him home. Upon waking up with his morning hit, Tim instead learns that Hawk is set to embark on another cycle of hedonistic escapism. Hawk encourages Tim to come back, but Tim gets right in his face and tells him how self-centered he is. Tim leaves the room, sending Hawk a frightening message. As Hawk sends his party pals packing and gets ready to return to reality, Tim's message finally sinks him. In the climactic sequence of episode 7 of Fellow Travelers, Hawk and Tim are back in the hospital in San Francisco in 1986. With this additional context, it seems that Tim's trip to Fire Island saved Hawk's life and put him back on the straight and narrow path where he could support his family going forward. Tim, on the other hand, is not doing well. He had another seizure not long after. As Tim lies in the hospital bed, Hawk watches over him, laying the groundwork for what looks to be a devastating Fellow Travelers finale.